And new month. Martin?
He's ready.
Yeah.
He is so ready.
Let me open it up here. Hey, used to, oh,
We're starting, Susan. And
are these still your glasses?
Yeah.
Okay. Do they look good on me?
yeah,
Okay, great.
is that like a number, are we live? Yep. Oh, okay. For the public, I was gonna ask what size of that. All right, so we will call this committee of the whole to order at 6:35, 6:30, 6:41. Thank you to council. We have just had a public meeting down the road, upstairs of the fire hall in relation to a zoning bylaw request. And we have relocated here for our regular committee of the whole meeting. So that is calling it to order, and we'll proceed from there.
So we will begin this meeting of the Committee of the Whole by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal people who have been stewards of this place. I'd like to add as well that this council is committed to action where we can to support Aboriginal interests in our community. In particular, we acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crapper. That takes us to item number 3, which is the adoption of the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Crapper, that the agenda for the April 1st, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 3, any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll go to item 5.1, which is the administration in relation to the community grants program. This report is for information purposes only. It's moved by Councillor Crapper, seconded by Councillor Card, that the Committee of the Whole received the report entitled Administration Community Grants Program Intake 1 for information purposes. Councillor Card and Councillor Crapper.
I'd just like to comment, I think the numbers are appropriate and it's just a pleasure to realize this for the community, that the council and has matured enough and been efficient enough to be able to respond to the community's asks for funds. I think it's a really good thing, and I think the numbers are really good for the first year.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Crapper.
I'm wondering, speaking of numbers, if we could also have like what the actual costs are to the village and taxpayer of accessing, say, the community room at the arena for a meeting. Because if we are budgeting 30,000, but we're not, it's not money that we are realizing or would have realized. Because probably that meeting room wouldn't be booked if that group wasn't using it. Seems to me we might have an opportunity when it comes to budget meeting coming up to take from the $30,000 money that isn't money we actually need to spend. So if we need to spend it because there's a cleaner, need to spend it because there are utility costs, need to spend it for security, whatever the thing is, be interesting for us to know what we are losing by giving space to a group. Because if we're not losing 30,000, we might want to use the remainder of that allotted money for other pressures that we're going to face when it comes budget time.
Okay, CAO, could you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just a couple of comments through you, Madam Mayor. The first one would be the room rates are reflected when we discuss the general rates and fees bylaw. So that's where we adjust it for inflation and what's being used. But I see what you're saying is what are the expenses versus what we are giving away, essentially. And we can certainly look at that and bring that back to budget discussions.
Yeah.
But I think traditionally it was never reflected in the budget. So this is a means to try to capture what we have waived in the past. And because we've waived it in the past, we're not, I shouldn't say we're not, because I don't know that for sure, but there aren't any other, let's say, bookings in their spot because it's traditionally been given to this group, for instance. So I can certainly do the analysis, bring back some of the expenses that you're talking about for council to have a whole picture.
Yeah, because I agree with the line of questioning. I always thought it was gonna be a zero-sum gain budget line item. That it was gonna reflect, if we had rented it, what the cost would be. I never thought until Councilor Crapper asked the question that we would be allotting $30,000 to it. So somewhere in there, we have to hang on to every tax dollar that we can for other things, but recognizing the value. I mean, I always thought it was gonna be like the value proposition, that's the value to the public. So if we can work out something that will help us when it gets to budgeting time. Did you intend on having a $30,000 budget line item for this?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. So that was a benchmark that we used based on what we've traditionally waived and based on inflation and some of the other groups that have asked. For instance, WSL is a new ask. We haven't traditionally waived that fee in a higher amount.
Yeah.
So given that there are two intakes, so intake 1 is in January, and then intake 2, hypothetically, the hockey season, those types of groups will then apply the intake 2. We wanted to make sure that there was money still in the grants line item for other groups for the latter part of the year as well.
I know, but let's not, and we're not challenging you coming up with that amount of money, you know, that's certainly staff's prerogative and based upon what you get. What we're asking is, what is the real cost to the village that we need to budget for to cover the amount of usage? Yeah, I think, I don't think we need to beat it to death, but I think you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much,
Yeah.
Councilor Crapper.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question? Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that when you run any business, and this is to a certain extent a business, just because there's a line item for $30,000 doesn't mean you spend it, but I do think it's an opportunity to see what the actual cost is. So you charge the usage as the building's used against that line item, instead of trying to find some other way to absorb it. And next year when you do budget, if the requirement's not there, that's when you deal with it, but.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get it worked out. so
Yeah,
that
I mean,
we-
just to, clarify my interest, either, we could, if it actually, instead of $106 for an hour, whatever it is for use of a room, only costs 50 actual dollars to us, then we could be budgeting twice as much for use of the room if we chose to, or we could be using that money for other community needs.
Yeah, I think it's a growing pain with how we're doing it. The other part I like about it is it's transparent and it's open to the public, not just who gets in the door first and knows somebody. So I think it's terrific, but for sure, a couple of things that we need to work out on that. Anything on this side of the room? Go ahead.
For you, just a comment, just to say, I think it's a really good thing we're doing, you know, it shows, our community involvement. It shows it's not just for students or kids, it's for seniors, and if there's a widespread there, and that we're willing to work with community partners to help them. So,
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Cardy. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.2 is Public Works Harbor Plan and Feasibility Study Result. And so this is also for information purposes. It's moved by Councilor Card, seconded by Councilor Crapper, that Committee of the Whole receive the report from Harbor Plan and Feasibility Study Result for information purposes. Any discussion? Go with Councilor Crapper first and then Councilor Card.
I just wondered if there was a mistake in it, because I see $170,000 for phase 1 in the report, but the briefing note spoke to $270,000 in the recommended phase 1.
Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks, Sheila. So through your worship, the amount reflected in the information item, which will be brought back to budget, the feasibility study had a goal of increasing dock space, updating aging infrastructure, but the second part of that, updating the aging infrastructure, is some of the dock sections that are failing on the north side of the island. So the goal set by council in April last year, I think, for coming on a year, was that we would look at a way to fund the replacement of those failing docks by opening up some additional slips. So that's where the financial discussion is around. So the phase 1 cost is the lower number. The revenue is meant to cover the cost of phase 1 and the replacement of the north section of Island Walls.
Okay.
Failing.
All right,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
And I just like, this is a new approach by staff, giving us detailed briefing notes before we go into budget discussions. Really appreciate it,
Totally.
really appreciate it. Counselor Carr.
Yeah, a couple things, follow up with Councillor Crapper's comments there. We hired an engineer and I'm just wondering, did we make our wants clear to them? Because they've specifically laid out phase one, phase two, and we've deviated from that right off the bat. The second, having been involved with and heard a lot about harbor and what have you in the past, one of the key components that consistently came up in any discussion previously about harbor was breakwater. And I don't see breakwater in this. And the way the layout is for a lot of these slips, you're facing incoming waves and people with 20 and 32-foot boats and larger, they don't want them banging and bouncing up and down. So there is availability of a breakwater that's also a dock. And I'm just wondering whether we should make sure that we, limit our liability there by providing the proper accommodation for the boaters.
Good question. Go ahead, Peter.
So through your, again, so part of why this information is coming to council this time is we haven't given council the opportunity to review this plan as a habit as a whole. And so we're not asking for approval of this plan at this time. We just know we're in the stage where we need to have council informed for budget. I would think that the remainder of the report should come back to council sometime this summer or fall, where we can discuss a little bit more in detail whether the council is going to endorse the plan as a whole. Also, there was a fair amount of discussion around breakwater with the consultant, and they intentionally tied a lot of that into the very preliminary design of those exterior docks. I think there's some work and some clarification that has to happen there, and I fully support that. But there was a lot of discussion around breakwater around that eastern boundary of those docks.
To follow up to your worship, I guess my point is, why would we go forward and endorse a plan that we've already deviated from? Let's revise the plan to reflect what the wants are and what we're gonna deal with primarily and secondarily.
So we're not being asked to recommend anything tonight, but I guess I needed to read it in more detail. My eyes glazed over when I got to phase two. But I thought phase one was really maintenance and repairs to the existing structure. Is that right?
No.
Peter?
So through your, I would like to review the deviations, phase
Okay.
one. I didn't pick up on deviations with phase one.
didn't
So
either.
apologies, phase one is the extension of the docks near and central to the existing floating docks. No modifications to the crossing or the existing section other than the replacement of those failed sections. So ahead of, yeah, apologize, I perhaps.
Okay, well, why don't we park this? Because I also, it's for information purposes, for purpose of budgeting, but it is a 2025 expense.
Right.
So we can't put it off to 2026. We need to decide for this budget year what we're gonna do in the fall, after spawning or whenever you get in.
That is correct, Your Worship. We have to decide what we're gonna do this year.
Okay, so is it possible to address Councillor Card's questions at council?
I think so, Your Worship. I just, if Councilor Card feel reach out, I apologize if I'm missing. I would have identified deviations from phase one if perhaps
Okay.
missed something.
Through you, your worship.
Yeah.
Phase one, drawing C2, basically it's just the addition of two 20-foot slips and 13 32-foot slips. Repairs to the north section don't occur until Phase 3. Is what-
So if you've heard what the concerns are, can you bring it back to council?
Yeah, through,
Give those clarifications, please.
like, council or budgets or before. Well,
Council
council.
first. Council's first.
Yes.
So if we could have that back in 2 weeks and clarify, what, if we are deviating from the engineer report line. That's like what the question is. And then we'll talk about it again in 2 weeks. Go ahead.
It would be super helpful too, through you, to have I need a bit of an explanation about where on that map are the parts of the dock that are most problematic.
Sure.
I'm guessing a little bit looking at the diagrams a little bit when I see it. Be great if you could have it up there and go, so here's where the big problem is, and here's what the dream is, and,
Okay.
Yeah.
I just smiling, we sat in on a meeting once where we saw the dream unfold in front of us. Okay, let's, we'll move one last point and then.
Just one more comment. My only concern is that, we've been told since 2017 that structurally the north section is
Critical.
critical.
Yeah.
So I'm not, not in favor of Public Works, move to do that. I just think that, it's just not, it just doesn't follow the plan. So what I'm saying is let's fix the plan, not fix the intent. I think that Public Works has the right idea to eliminate or at least, reduce our liability for an unsafe dock. I think that's the sensible thing to do, but I think, so that, the public can follow it, they can look at the plan and say, here's what's gonna happen next.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And I'm trying to speed read through it with your concerns and that's just not, good governance. So we'll wait until it comes back in 2 weeks and we'll have those questions answered then. You gonna ask the same question or?
No, I'm gonna ask a different question.
Okay.
As a follow-up to Councillor Crapper's question, I'm still confused about the 170 versus the
too.
270. I think we're-
Okay, so that'll come
confused.
back in
Yeah.
2 weeks. I'm confused as well.
Okay.
Okay.
We're all confused.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
So we'll get that clarified for sure. Thanks, Peter. So the motion, we're gonna change it then to, we'll just defer the motion until council.
Sure.
Is that all right with everybody? Okay, defer, could I have a motion to defer? Councilor Crawford,
Second.
Karen, second.
that is before our budget meeting though, right?
Yeah.
My challenge is that with such a big ask in advance of budget meeting, I'm pretty anxious about our budget.
Okay, you're right. And so when you get to budget, you'll
Yeah,
have all this
yeah,
information.
okay, good. good.
That's the
Yeah,
purpose
yeah.
I've asked for, not while we're trying to figure out the budget. For big items like this, give you some time. Okay.
Great.
All right, so for the deferral, all in favor? Carrie, that's great, thank you. And thank you, Peter, we're not being critical, we're just confused. All right. 5.3, Public Works, the library entrance update. Okay, so let's get the motion on the table. Are you comfortable moving it, Martin? Or do you want it to go the other way?
Yeah, I've got some, I'm okay with the motion to accept the,
Okay.
yeah, I'm okay with that.
So it's moved by Councillor Cropper, seconded by Councillor Carr, that the committee of the whole recommend council receive the report entitled Library Entrance Update for information purposes. So the public's watching, so let's bring this back to the beginning. The accessibility ramp at the library does not meet any code and is very difficult to even use in the winter because of the angle of it. The AODA used to require that by 2025, all public buildings were accessible. That has since changed. And the requirement under the building code is with any renovations you do, you need to comply with the code for accessibility. So in that vein, there was a Trillium grant. Clerk, can I get you just to close the line beside you? Thanks. There was a Trillium grant available that seemed to meet, it was an accessibility Trillium grant. And you decided that this time around, it would be a submission for the library for accessibility. The staff worked with library people, I'm sure, came up with a budget of what it would be to put a ramp on the east side of the building and change the main desk in the library so that it was an accessible desk. That's the main point, as I recall, from the grant application. And we were successful, $193,000 for it. And so and then the challenges that unfolded from that were if nobody's making but the building code, Ontario Building Code. And staff have worked with the board. The board had rated issues early days about the location of the ramp, particularly when they learned that under the building code, when you make an accessible opening, that is your main entrance. So that became more problematic for the board. And so first of all, I want to thank them for all of their input. Our staff, I want to thank them. They have, you know, my dad died when I was a kid, but I can still remember saying, you know, to try and make good out of this, you may as well go and stand on your head and spit silver dollars. Because they have tried every possible angle on the building to come up with something, even with all the perils that we've had with the elevator at the arena, they entertained another elevator option. As our report says, but the public's not reading it, no plan is viable except the plan of putting the ramp on the east side of the building. So that's, I wanted to not to try and share it to you how I'm gonna vote on this. But I wanted to let you know that I think that the board has expressed their concerns, and Councillor Crapper says he's got some feedback for us, so that's good. I want to speak on behalf of staff, because I'd say they have really put their shoulder into this to try and find something different. We have what we have, and we have $193,000 to spend. So that's where we're at for the public watching. Everybody has done their due diligence, spent many hours on it. But where we are at is a recommendation to go ahead with the ramp on the east side of the building. So before I come to council, does any staff, since this was written, anything else that you want to add?
One of the important factors, thank you through you, Madam Mayor, is that we did check with legal as well, and that they advised us accordingly. I think it's reflected high level in the report, the CBO, the planner, and just all of the different resources that the village has. And so that's really where we came up with the fact that this is really the only viable and feasible option. Is there anything else?
I think,
Go ahead. Yeah.
Your Worship, so like the previous report, this is an information item. This report would be a lot longer to go into detail on each different design.
Yeah.
They had to answer questions. So we took a lot of information from board. The board presented us quite a few ideas. We took those ideas back to engineers, architects, legal, and suppliers, and we really were running into brick walls in a lot of different these ways, and we've been left this. We've been working on this for quite a bit longer than we were aware of the Trillium Grant. We've been recognizing this accessibility issue at the facility for quite some time. And it's a small lot with some great issues, really limiting our ability to tie into those grades.
Okay, services. So that's sort of the background. I'm going to Councillor Crapper first, if that's okay, Councillor. That's sort of the background. Go ahead, sir.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I agree that, I want to share my appreciation to staff, because I know better than most how long and many discussions that there have been about this. And to find a solution to accessibility is important to us. And it's part of my background that I'm interested in that. And so we had a meeting today of the library board, and we had a pre-meeting just to really focus on this, walk through it. Unfortunately, timing wise, like the board found out about this and their disappointment only had about 24 hours to settle in. So, you know, people, when they're expecting a different outcome, it's harder to adjust. But I have to report that at the end of our discussion, I think all of us agreed that, you know, that's the way that accessibility into the building can be had. The chief concern has to do not with the ramp and accessibility, simply with some operational impacts in the building. So, and there are ideas, and I have a recommendation at the end of this little spiel that I'd like to share. But primarily it's that at the back of the building is our children's area. And the children's area is our busiest programmatic area. And it has a door to keep the little ones contained, and the noise contained. Parents go in there every day with their kids. That's where the children's stuff is. And to have it anywhere else in that building will not be an easy thing to do and have that kind of containment of privacy. And we worry about the cost of that. So the primary, but there is a simple, I'm not gonna go into it, my recommendation is that staff meet with the library board folks, Jamie and Trevor largely, I guess, and Pam. I'm gonna interject on myself, I learned today that September 2026 is 40 years that Pam has worked in that library, and 40 years that that building has been here serving as a library. So Pam's insight into what works and doesn't work in that building, we have to make sure that we continue to inform us about what we should be thinking about as possible solutions. The ramp can happen the way the ramp's planned, all of that stuff can happen, but we really would like staff to spend time listening to board and Pam about some of the, as you put it, Kim, or I guess Kim, what was the term? The functions and, it was a nice term, I wrote it down. But just how it, the fine tuning, the aesthetic and the functioning, those are the things we worry about. Where the service desk, because you're right, the grant included about 10 grand for a service desk.
Yeah.
Where it's located matters to Pam, because she's responsible for being able to monitor the whole thing. And she's got some safety worries herself about where it is for her own. So making sure their input is part of the decision about aesthetic and functioning is critical. And I think essential if we really want an ongoing positive partnership like we've got right now. So we're good with the plan.
Good.
Like the improvements, in fact, the board over concrete, where there's some worry, I'm sure you figured it out about snow falling off of that roof onto that ramp, but at the end of the
Because
day,
hopefully it's gonna be heated.
yeah, hopefully.
All
Be
right,
a
so
great place to
board's on,
sleep.
the board is happy, it can live with content,
board
whatever
can-
the right word is.
Yes, so long as the function and aesthetic fine tuning directly reflects their input.
Of course.
Because
and
they've
it's
got
given.
great, to me, they said it, I said, but nobody's gonna have a problem with that. And you gotta know, you probably used it with your kids, Amy, that back room works. Nothing else in there is gonna work. So we'll share with you the thoughts, but,
Okay, and of course, staff would have no issue with that, they
no.
working with, so that's for information, but I'm glad that it's on the street. That's what's important, the clock is ticking
Yeah.
on that.
When is the clock, what is what have they said we have to have the money spent by?
It's Kim's a year deferred.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we've asked for an extension in lieu of trying to iron out design. But I believe it's 2 years from
The date,
From that date?
from the date of the announcement,
Yeah,
instead of
right.
1 year, we got
Yeah.
another year.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's good.
2 years.
Okay, that's good.
Mhm.
You had a question?
I did, yeah, I had two, and one was just answered about
Okay.
timing. My other question is just clarity. If I understand the briefing and the design properly, does that mean that the front entrance that exists now is gonna be closed and eliminated completely?
Well, I think yet to be determined, I'd like to see a crash door there, but that's politician talking, let's see what the recommendation is from staff.
And that's part of what staff there would like to have some input into.
It won't be a working door,
No,
because that's against
yeah.
the code.
They've already had that
Yeah,
conversation with you.
Yeah, so let staff come back with a recommendation for that. Okay, I shouldn't have said that loud in the back of my mind, I'm hoping it's a crash door that they can get out if they need to. But then if they take away the steps, then it won't work, so let's let staff scratch their head, meet with Pam and the board and see what they can come up with. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Thank you. I'll call the question then, all in favor? Carried, okay, thank you, and thank you for having those discussions and meetings, I really appreciate it. All right, 5.4, Public Works Recreation Vehicle Budgetary Discussions. So we asked for a briefing report so that we would understand better the idea of a new vehicle. It's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Crapper, that the Committee of the Whole of the Village of Westport received the report of the Manager of Public Works entitled Recreation Vehicle Budgetary Discussion Briefing for information purposes. All right, go ahead, Councillor Card.
I hope that Mr. Evans didn't go to all this trouble because of my comments at the last meeting.
He's smiling.
This is much more in-depth than I would have asked for personally, but I do absolutely understand his plan and the necessity of the primary vehicle being the new vehicle and the secondary vehicle going to being disposed of to Parks and Recreation to fulfill their chores. That was a lot of reading for.
It was a well-written
It
report, very
was,
thorough.
absolutely. He covered every conceivable.
But you know, people from the public are gonna say, what, another vehicle? They just have to go here. Tomorrow, our Zoom link and our agenda are gonna be on the webpage that we talked about. So people going, oh, well, what was that deal? They can go and read the very detailed report that explains what you just said. Okay, thank you. Anybody? Oh, okay, I'm gonna go over here for change. Councillor Cardy and then Councillor Aragon.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to clarify, is there a need right now for a new truck for Public Works, just for the public to hear? When you replace it, and it goes to Parks and Rec, is it because you need a new truck, definitely?
So go ahead, Peter.
So through your
You don't think any public works guy's gonna say, no, I don't need a truck, sorry.
I'll say it slightly differently.
Okay, no,
There is some life left in the existing truck. And otherwise it wouldn't be useful to recreation. Based on our, asset management plan, a pickup truck typical estimated useful life is at 7 to 8 years. We are getting near the end of that. The utility side, the need for a new truck is tied into, we are getting there very quickly. It's the primary response vehicle for all of the utilities that the village uses. And the fact that it's just a pickup truck means frequent back and forth from the shop where we're loading and unloading and changing equipment for the job at hand. So there's an opportunity to improve the vehicles for the utilities. If the council at budget were to determine that it wasn't a priority for recreation to get the vehicle, the current truck would stay with the utilities and the ratepayers. And it would be still a budget request that's gonna be coming forward in the near future. I think that's best I have for that.
thank you. Councillor Aragon, asked and answered. Okay, very good. Councillor Crawford.
Through you, to Mr. Evans, how many kilometers per year on that truck?
Go ahead.
Apologies, Richard. So that is a good question. I believe it is somewhere near 4,000 or 5,000. It's not a high kilometers. But the years wear on these vehicles much more than the kilometers do. Whether it's idle time running lights, just the time on the roads and in the salt is so much more than a personal vehicle typically is. The council, keep an eye on the truck as it go by, you'll know corrosion from that time that we have on there.
Go ahead.
I had a second question, which was probably more directed to Kim. The whole ratepayer taxpayer breakdown, like ratepayers are taxpayers too,
But
as well, though, right?
all taxpayers are not ratepayers.
So all ratepayers.
No, it's the way around.
The main difference.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's still a useful breakdown.
You are a taxpayer.
I know, I'm not a ratepayer.
I am both.
Yeah, I know, I realize that, but I just want to make sure that it's
Oh,
still,
yes,
is it still a sensible breakdown for a truck?
yes.
You like it?
I think it's gotta be. We do it for loans, we do it for everything.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure how widespread that.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, what's the amount that aren't on water sewer? It's very limited.
It's a low percentage, but the distinction is extremely important for budgeting and then legislation for drinking water, financial money that's brought in from water has to stay in water. So even though that percentage might be small, the legislation and the financial plan requires that money that's collected from ratepayers stays working for the ratepayers.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Go ahead. I knew I was coming here. I can see the look.
You
Okay, I got
saw
the-
me thinking. Just when you mentioned personal vehicle use, through you,
Yes.
Madam Mayor, to Peter. Are we going to be faced with the same, conversation? Are there more personal vehicles being used for village work, than this one that we're trying to replace?
Go ahead.
Through your worship, so at this point, there's manager vehicles that are operated as POVs from time to time in the village, some more, some less. The biggest difference is outlined in the report is the work that's done out of those personal vehicles. And whereas managerial work is not typically carrying tools, acting as blocker trucks, being positioned in the middle of roadways, if you will, to control traffic. And I'd maybe look for clarification on the wording, but it's typically assumed that managers will have from time to time, aspects of their job that use personal vehicles, and we have a mileage rate for that. For task and operations staff to position their vehicles and to put that equipment in their vehicles is the difference.
Yeah.
So I believe the route was, as some of the managers are gonna come back looking for vehicles in the future, I don't believe that's the case. The advantage at this point, the percentages are smaller, the risks are smaller, the work is very different.
I call the question and all in favor. Carried. Great. 5.5, this is the village snow removal operations. We knew that there was a complaint put in about snow being piled up at the foot of Bedford Street. And at the last meeting, we asked Peter to come back with a written report rather than answer it on the spot. So that's what this information purposes report is. Moved by Councillor Crapper, seconded by Councillor Card, that the Committee of the Whole of the Village of Westport received the report entitled Village Snow Removal Operations for Information Purposes. Comments? Councillor Card and then Councillor Crapper.
I'm just assuming that there was no snow piled there, that's just what was plowed to the side and ended up at the front of the plow after a normal plow session, a street clearing session. The size of the pile, to me, like, I had a bigger pile in my backyard, really. But if you want to consider, you know, the implications of salt and whatever, County Road 10, which is not controlled or monitored by the village, runs right through the village. There would be 100 times the salt and snow plowed to the side and drained to the lake as there would from village property. So I find it odd that the village is pinpointed for, and somebody didn't look at the whole picture there is what I'm saying. They didn't take everything into account. They just zoomed in on made an assumption that the village was dumping snow there that was contaminated. I don't think that's
And it was just the snow from Maine to the
Yeah.
foot. There was nothing extra brought in there. But on the other hand, you know, and I don't like complaints and staff don't like complaints coming in or dealing with ministries, particularly Ministry of the Environment that we have fought so hard over the years to have a really good relationship with. But it cleared the air. The report's public now. The people who complain can read the report and know where that's gone. You know, there was an accommodation made that take it off the hard surface, put it on the grass. But if a order had come from the ministry, it would have been difficult not to include every other township around us. So I think they saw the wisdom of the accommodation that we made. Did you have a question?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting little bit of research to look into, because we're certainly not, we're not the only municipalities who has been criticized or for whom questions have been asked. Well, I would take it more as questions being asked about information, as you say, that people don't often have the full picture of. And Ottawa, for example, is known as, last year was said to be use the most road salt of any city in the country. And so that makes a city like Ottawa start to gather data so that they can paint the picture of what do they do about it? And I'm wondering through you to Peter, do we keep data on the amount of salt that we use year to year, or would that be possible? Because that would demonstrate whether it was a heavier year, lighter year, whether, and in addition to that, because you hint at this in the report, but my research didn't show much are there alternatives to salt that are seen as successful elsewhere? What are other municipalities doing about the issue when it comes to chloride leaching into lakes?
Go ahead.
So, through your worship, this was a topic of discussion around like how we plow and maintain the roads, and being able to add some of the technology to actually track dosage per kilometer is gonna help us quite a bit to make sure we're keeping our dose down. Anecdotally, our dose is lower than a lot of the county roads. Our speeds are lower, our roads can be narrower, and this does help. But the goal of Public Works is to not use any more salt than we have to put it in the right spot on the roadway and so that it stays there. And hoping some of the new technology we're gonna be bringing in winters to come are gonna help with that. As it stands up until this year, we spread salt with a broadcast spreader that puts salt evenly across the road. For us, in the field, it'd be more akin to a parking lot salter, where we're looking to broadcast along here. So we're actively trying to minimize the amount of salt and minimize the amount of salt from both environmental and a cost perspective. We do track how much salt we use in a year, but we don't have a lot of historical data on it. We have started tracking through a program where we source our salt. Also, as far as the question on alternatives to salt, again, we don't have a ton of information on that. I haven't spent a great deal going through each case by case by case. However, all of the ones that I have gone through, I find that most of them are just chlorides in a different flavor. So the material itself, it might be something more natural. We've heard beet juice, we've heard other more organic materials. In the end, the active ingredient, if you will, has the same risks to the lakes that the chlorides do, and usually at a much higher cost. They sound more natural, but they usually aren't any better for the environment. The properties that we're looking for to lower that melting temperature of the ice are what it can do to harm. And the best recommendation I have for the village is keep looking at ways to minimize our salt usage, put it down in the proper location at the proper times.
A quick follow-up would be a suggestion that maybe in your quarterly reports in the winter, if you started having that data in there, people could start seeing, okay, well, that's, no, there's no more salt this year than last year. Oh, there's less salt than last year. Or maybe you're like with I were finding ways of reducing by use of technology. It would just be data that people could use to
Find some
consider.
context for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Through you, your worship, to Peter, is there any provision in your new truck? Is there any kind of like, I don't know, latest I could think of Dickie John or, but is there any, is that something that's available to you or?
Go ahead.
The through there is, it's a coffee spread is the name brand of this version. It does track salt monitoring. And it does simple things like stop when the truck stops and all those good things. So we do have those patrols. I can't say that that's gonna be the 100% truck. We still have the other truck that's gonna be on the road and used more of a backup, but our goal is to use this vehicle. The other big aspect of this, the new truck, is that it drops the salt where it's actually needed on the crown of the road instead of broadcasting it across the back. So both the dosing, the tracking, and the salt amounts are, I believe, are going to be reduced noticeably with this.
That's great.
piece of
Yeah, it's
kit.
good.
It's great.
Yeah, good. Okay, then I'll call the question on that. All in favor? All right, 5.6, Recreation Westport Harbor Kayak Storage Facility Addendum. We'll recall at the last discussion, we wanted a legal opinion on what risk there was to the village if it got put in place and what other criteria would be required. So it's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Crapper. The committee of the whole recommends that council approve staff's recommendation to offer a kayak storage rental rack at the harbor, subject to a ratified rental agreement. Any comments?
It looks like a good ROI on the project. I mean, it's, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, no risk.
All
That's what
right.
I say.
No risk.
Yeah, all right.
Good to go.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Good. And that brings us to 5.7 from the Treasury, 2024 Council Remuneration and Expenses Addendum. I think there was an edit made.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the motion is moved by Councillor Crapper, seconded by Councillor Card, that committee of the whole received the report entitled Treasury 2024 Council Remuneration Addendum for information purposes. I'll call. We already discussed it. Do you want to discuss it again? No. I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Very good. And there's an information item there. If somebody wants to run for the school board, you know how to put your application in. Any notices of motion? Any announcements? Any questions from the public? Any questions from the media?
Just one tiny detail, maybe too detailed. On that, with respect to the library and the interior renovations, there's a note that it would, about staircases in the interior. Is that true that the staircase? I was thinking of the staircase to the basement
Won't be impacted,
will not be
will not be
impacted.
impacted, no.
So no staircases on the inside would be impacted.
Won't be impacted with the renovation, just the front entrance and ramp are gonna be impacted by the ramp going up the east side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's no change to the stairs and the inside.
Okay, thanks, Susan. All right, and that being said, we're gonna go into close session. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to call the question in regard to the school board vacancy. It was moved by Councilor Card, seconded by Councilor Crapper. This is an information item. All in favor? Just gotta clear that off my table.
Apply for that, Amy?
Five, six, and eight.
Bye.
So we'll go to closed session, moved by Councilor Cardy, seconded by Councilor Aragona, that the committee of the whole proceed into closed session as permitted under the municipal act to consider personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees. All in favor? Carried.
I don't know.
We're good. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. Council met in closed session to consider personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees. Council provided instruction to staff, and that motion is moved by Councillor Hardy, seconded by Councillor Aragona. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. And our adjournment of the committee of the whole is moved by Councillor Aragona, seconded by Councillor Cardy. That it be adjourned at 7:45 PM. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.